Good morning, everyone.
No, it's not.
Welcome to the 12th Annual Legislative Breakfast of the Greater New Bedford Allies for Health and Wellness and Greater Fall River Partners for a Healthier Community. We are delighted that so many of you could be with us this morning. My name is Mary Ann D'Souza, and I am chairperson of Greater New Bedford Allies for Health and Wellness. Allies is a coalition of individuals and organizations representing the towns of Acushnet, Dartmouth, Fairhaven, Freetown, Mattapoisett, Marion, the city of New Bedford, and the town of Rochester and Riverview.
I'm Wendy Garflip, and I'm the chairperson of Greater Fall River Partners for a Healthier Community. Building healthier communities is a shared responsibility, and Greater Fall River Partners for a Healthier Community has mounted a collaborative effort including all the sectors of the Greater Fall River community: residents, health professionals, business leaders, government officials, clergy, and academia, to improve the health and quality of life for all residents of Fall River, Somerset, Swansea, and Westport. A healthy community is one that is continually creating and improving itself to ensure a healthy environment for all. The work we do at both Partners and Allies is dependent on our collaborative efforts and outreach to our respective communities, and our partner in helping to improve the Fall River community, His Honor, Mayor William Flanagan.
Mary Ann and Wendy, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
What a great turnout we have here this morning. And I remember attending this event last year, and there's more people here this year than there was last. And I think that is an accomplishment of all the organizers here today for being able to put on such a great event. And I want to thank all of the partners, the food vendors, the associations, the organizations who are here this morning, who continue to improve the quality of life for the people throughout our region. And there is a number of elected officials here who are also in this fight with us. I want to recognize School Committee Man Tim McCoy. Tim, thank you for being here. Programs that we have launched throughout our city that is improving the quality of life for the people of Fall River. You know, when we work with CD Rec, we do a healthy initiative where we take our citizens and bring them in and get them involved in eating healthier and exercising. We've launched a number of farmers markets throughout our city that focus on locally grown produce, making sure that people are eating healthy and have an opportunity to purchase produce at a low price point. And we're going to be taking that concept of the summer food markets and bringing it also into a winter market, and we're exploring that opportunity right now. And that's also good for commerce, because the more foot traffic we're able to create in our city, and the more vendors we're able to bring into our city, the more of an economic development spirit we're having in the city of Fall River. We've asked all of our students not to be drinking soda-type beverages, and we're trying to bring healthier food within our classrooms, because what we're seeing through studies is some of the best meals that our youth get are taking place within inside of a school building. And even though that's a systemic change, we have to do something in society. Our children are relying upon us to making sure that they're getting the nutrition that they need, not only for their lives, but also to make sure that they're having a successful school day. So, as the leader of our city, I truly see firsthand the results of what a diet can have on somebody and a healthy initiative that someone can have, and how it will affect their lives. And also what I feel so great about this, you know, you're bringing all these different communities together. And when you're able to do that for any particular issue, to see so many cities and towns represented in one room, you know the issue is a worthwhile cause. So enjoy your breakfast, everybody. Good to be here with you, and God bless all of you. Thank you.
Jameson is the program director from Community Development Recreation. He is a member of the Somerset School Board, and he is the vice chairperson of Greater Fall River Partners for a Healthier Community. Thank you, Jameson.
Thank you, Wendy.
Wendy asked me to introduce the elected officials. I don't know why. No, I think first and foremost, Partners for a Healthy Community, as well as the Chinar in New Bedford, and all of you have been doing an amazing job throughout this year, throughout the years. And I say thank you to all of
We
you.
have the pleasure of having you here today as the mayor of the city of New Bedford to speak to you.
Normally, what that is, how that's phrased is all of us will miss him, but what I'm hoping to do is continue to work with all of you, do the important work in the city of New Bedford and the region. And certainly, while I'm going to be leaving City Hall, I'm certainly not going to be leaving, an activist type of life here, and I'm gratifying to me and effective, so I'm looking forward to that time to get back to being a civilian like many of you. I saw on the way out, Mayor Flanagan indicated to me that he had just finished up speaking to you and that he was commenting on what a great group of people we have here at White's, and I want to tell you I feel exactly the same way. This collaborative that's taken place in our region over the last several years, God bless you, is something I think that is extremely important to all the families, the young people in our cities and towns. It'll pay dividends in the future. I've talked about last year or the year before when I was here, I talked about the whole link between sound body, mind, spirit, how important it is to look at these issues all completely connected. I know that we're all working hard in that way, that there's no, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put together healthy bodies if we don't have healthy minds, if we don't have good citizens who understand their obligation. We all have been involved in Mass in Motion. That's a great program. And then a lot of us have been involved in Let's Move. New Bedford, I was lucky enough to fall into Let's Move within the first few hours of it being announced, and I was one of the first mayors to sign on to Let's Move. And then from there, Mass in Motion developed, and with it, we know now with the nature of our federal revenue sharing programs that are exist or coming into vote, and the money that we have been competing for recently, the CDC money that involves child obesity programs and whole wellness programs, our competitive grants. And New Bedford got on very, very early the idea that we would try and gear up to win some of these grants. And we received a grant just this past week from our Department of Health by way of CDC that is going to help us with this whole issue of childhood obesity of our children. So I look forward to hearing, I know I will hear later from Mary Ann and Pauline, and Dr. Francis is here this morning, I see, and many, many people from the city of New Bedford about your conference. But I think the best work in America is being made in rooms like this, where people come together, give a tremendous amount of thought and care to our communities, and to try and make sure that we're on the right path. So thank you for letting me come by and speak, and I look forward to hearing back. Thanks.
The choice of the theme was no accident. October 24th, which is Monday, has been designated as National Food Day by the Center for Science in the Public Interest. The idea for a National Food Day was conceived by CSPI's director, Michael Jacobson. He noted in a recent article in The Atlantic that the way our food is grown, transported, processed, marketed, and ultimately eaten is not sustainable for the environment or our health. Diet, together with a sedentary lifestyle, causes obesity, diabetes, heart attacks, and cancers that result in several 100,000 deaths per year. In southeastern Mass, we face high rates of many of these diseases, and food is linked to all. The New Bedford and Fall River Chenal Planning Committee promoted Food for Thought as a way to understand our local food system. focus on food of high nutritional quality that is accessible and affordable, understand that the food we grow in our region should be grown in a sustainable and environmentally responsible way, realize that programs and projects we develop should have a sustainable component, and that we are all accountable for the type of food that is available in all the environments in which we live, learn, work, and play. You've heard many of the initiatives that are going on in the communities that surround us by the two mayors that spoke. So many organizations with many different goals are engaged in creating a better food system. A group of us got together to convene a regional food policy council to better understand areas of our food system that are working and growing, and areas that might need some attention, to better gauge where we might direct our energies. CSPI's director noted that while disparate, even seemingly disconnected groups don't see eye to eye on everything, there are countless opportunities where they can build on each other's strengths. The planning committee had this in mind when we invited today's keynote speaker, Tony Geraci. Tony is a chef and food service consultant and is the former director of food nutrition for the Baltimore City Public Schools. Prior to his move to Baltimore, he was the developer and executive director of First Course, a culinary training and job placement program for people who are developmentally disabled or recovering from substance abuse and mental illness. He has been an enthusiastic supporter and practitioner and architect of the National Farm to School movement. He is also a member of the National Food Day Advisory Board. Tony is a native of New Orleans and a third-generation restaurateur. More recently, he has worked with food service directors throughout the country, streamlining their operations for purchasing, introducing local products to their menus, and incorporating vocational training. He was featured in the film Two Angry Moms, a documentary about the National School Lunch Program, and he's also the feature in a current film, Cafeteria Man, the story of the transformation of the Baltimore City Public Schools lunch and breakfast program. His New Hampshire program was cited as best practices example as one of the most innovative approaches to school nutrition in the nation. Tony's work has been featured in Gourmet Magazine, The Atlantic, The Urbanite, The Diane Rehm Show, The Food Network, The Washington Post, and a host of other radio, print, and television appearances. As a result of his innovations in Baltimore, Tony was voted by his peers as Food Service Director Magazine's Food Service Director of the Year for 2009. He has also been recognized as a community leader. Maryland's Governor, Martin O'Malley, awarded Tony the first Smart, Green, and Growing Buy Local Agriculture Award for successfully incorporating fresh local foods into Baltimore's cafeteria. Tony is now using his abundant energy, enthusiasm, and expertise to assist school districts, food service providers, and corporations in their quest to provide better quality food to children in a fiscally responsible and accessible manner. It is our hope today that you will put on your innovator hats and be inspired to action by Tony's message. We welcome Tony Geraci, and we start with a short clip from Cafeteria Man.
Tony Geraci is with us. He's Baltimore's new director of food nutrition.
Here in Baltimore, I'm currently in the process of building a central kitchen for the school systems.
We got 85,000 kids out there that's looking for a meal every day. His responsibility is to make sure that he gives them these fresh fruits and vegetables that they're asking for.
This has never been done. We're making some history right here. This is going to be a model that every state in this country is going to start using to feed their kids local, fresh food. My boss, Dr. Alonzo, wants this to happen, and that's why I was hired. I was hired to make that happen.
Focusing on school food reform is at some level essential.
We wanted to have it much better because it was disgusting. The milk was sour, the bread was molded,
NPR in Washington. I'm Diane Ray. What have you done?
Urban agriculture projects, increased awareness to our kids-only Maryland-grown fruits and vegetables to be purchased by our school district. So I can buy Maryland peaches for 8 cents a piece, or I can buy USDA peaches packed in a can at 14 cents a portion. It's ludicrous.
I ate because I was hungry and I had nothing to eat. And I didn't bring lunch every day. So that was the only food I had. Kids always want to tell me what's wrong.
We brought the food down and gave it to the school board.
We want you to try it.
It's not green.
The number one thing they talk about is cafeteria food.
We have a 33-acre organic farm, and I see things finished. This little thing right here is going to be a farm stand. Down here in the big animal barn, I would put chickens, turkeys, and geese, and I saw kids planting things and taking things back to their schools. This place needs to be a living, breathing, working farm where kids see the animals and they see that whole process. And they get that, food doesn't come from a bag and safely. If Baltimore can pull this off, it will send a signal that this is an investment worth making. You guys are revolutionaries in the truest sense of the word. I think it's really important to have Tony's in the position that he's in. I think if somebody's unleashing the type of vision he's unleashing, I could not do his job.
They all need to be loaded at the same time. You start like a 4 a.m. shift.
I don't think I have the courage to do Tony's job. The resources in Maryland are amazing. The farms in Maryland are amazing.
If Tony makes this happen here the way he has promised to, the way he wants to, and it works, I think you'll see this happening all over the country.
The schools are like an $800 million a year economic driver. Why the hell are they spending the money here? How do you do this? How do we figure this stuff out? What I'm proposing is a completely different paradigm. This is crazy. We need a recipe for change. Is this film going to make me look fat?
On Bourbon Street, so I might have been better off being raised by wolves. But I was fortunate that I grew up in a city that names its highways after chefs. I grew up in a place where food is honored and the traditions of food are honored. The two most influential cooks in my life were my two grandmothers. My father's mother just celebrated her 101st birthday last Sunday. And she knows about the work that I do. And she said, she's an old Sicilian lady, and she said, I think I know how to stop this whole childhood obesity. And I said, "Che fa, Grandma? Che fa, Nonna?" And she said, "Make them eat their greens and go out and play." So simple wisdom around this stuff. So, look, I got involved in child nutrition by accident. I was a very, very successful restaurateur. And I raised my kids in a small community in southern New Hampshire. And I had kind of a catastrophic, life-changing accident in my life. And the school district that I raised my kids in came to me and they said, "Look, you're a chef, you're a food guy, you're a businessman, you know a lot about this stuff. We don't want to be a chicken nugget factory anymore. Help us to change." So I took this job as a food service director in a small community, and I thought, how hard could it be, right? I've been running multi-million-dollar restaurants for a while. How hard could this be? Well, I figured out it was really hard, all right? And it amazed me that the few resources that food service directors have to feed kids nutritious, appropriate meals. And I learned a lot from these lunch ladies. I'm proud to say I'm a lunch lady. And so we sort of began at the beginning there. I helped found the New Hampshire Farm to School Network, and again, by accident. I was driving down the road, and I'm on my cell phone screaming at my produce guy about my apples. Where the hell are my apples? I need 8 bushels of apples every day to feed my kids in their garden. I kept dropping the cell call, right? So I pulled off to the side of the road, and I realized I'm parked in the middle of an apple orchard. So I walk up the road, there's this lady, Peg McLeod, who's sorting apples, and she has this big pile of palm-sized apples and a smaller pile of larger commercial-style apples. And I asked her about the apples, and she said, look, the little apples aren't a viable commercial apple, so we crush them into cider and use it for pig feed or whatever, and the big apples we sell at the stand. And I thought, my vans drive by here every day delivering food. Why aren't I buying local apples? So I said, look, I'd like to buy all of those little apples, because little apples, little hands, little kids, all kind of work together for me. So, and she teared up a little bit, and I didn't understand it at the time. And her husband, John, was the former president of the New England Fruit Growers Association, was in the final stages of Alzheimer's disease. And this 5th generation family farm was about to go away, because property in New England is often worth more in housing developments than they are in family farms. But through this collaborative effort that we put together, that we were able to create a contract that ensured her sustainability as a family farm. And I'm happy to say that it's still a family farm. I went back to my office and I called the other food service directors in the state, and I said, hey, do you guys have orchards in your towns? And they said, yeah. I said, are you buying apples from them? And they said, no. I said, why? So look, within 8 months, we had New Hampshire apples served to New Hampshire kids every day, and this continues to happen. This is like 6 years later, all right? And it's because, look, rather than building expressways to ship your money out of your state and out of your community, why not actively create off-ramps to keep the money here, all right? For every dollar that you spend in your local community, it flips 10 times before it leaves. That's the economic impact of spending a dollar in your town. So, our program was great, successful. I started working with the food service directors and the former chief of staff of the New York City Public Schools program, Dr. Antonio Andres Alonso, became the new superintendent of Baltimore City Public Schools. He's from Cuba, and he's a brilliant educator, and he was the first administrator that I had ever met that connected nutrition with education. Like, he understood that it would be unrealistic to put his teachers in front of kids that weren't ready to learn. So how do you spend billions of dollars on public education and then fill the room full of kids that are hungry or jacked up on sugar? You're wasting the money. Teachers, much like chefs, are very passionate about what they do. They became teachers because they want to teach. They don't want to be proctors. They don't want to be disciplinarians. They want to teach. So if they're spending half their day dealing with, behavioral issues, they don't get their job done. Our kids don't learn the lessons, and we have poor test scores, right? Kind of a little thing. So they invited me down. I'm a really good businessman. I'm a very successful businessman. And they asked me to come down and lay out my business plan on how I would feed 86,000 kids every day nutritious meals. So, somebody said Fall River is about 80,000 people, right? So imagine feeding that city every single day, breakfast, lunch, snack, maybe something else. It's, logistically, it's pretty, daunting. So I laid out my business plan. And I'm in this room full of all the suits, right? The suits are going, well, it'll never work, it's just too hard. The bureaucracy won't allow this to happen. And then I thought I heard Dr. Alonso mumble under his breath. He said, then I will kill the bureaucracy. So meeting ended, I go home. Christmas Eve, I get this email, right? This cryptic email to a link to the Baltimore Sun. And Baltimore Sun headlines, I open it up, Baltimore Sun headline opens up, and it says, It says, Dr. Alonso fires 230 bureaucrats in Baltimore City, and then there was a little note that said, do you still want the job? So of course I did. So you can go to the next slide. This is the amazing Dr. Antonio Alonso, right? Visionary. So look, all of this begins with visionary leadership. It begins, every single person in this room right now is a leader. It was very purposeful that you were invited to this meeting, all right, because of your leadership. You know, one of the hard things of leadership is leading, beginning the conversation, keeping the message up front and driving. So it's critical that you have great leadership to accomplish these things. So next slide. All right. So our kids. So I have 86,000 kids, right? And all of them qualified for free breakfast, right? I created this universal free breakfast program. But on our best days, we were feeding 8,500 kids. How do you change that? So I'm a chef, right? I go and I cook from my pantry, right? So I learned that from my grandmother. So I open the doors of my pantry and I look inside and I say, what do I have? And what I had in my pantry were birds. I had Baltimore Ravens and Baltimore Orioles, all right? Those were the birds that I had in my pantry. And I went to those guys and I said, look, help me to feed my kids. And it was very purposeful in that I asked them to collaborate with me. A couple of reasons, right? One, these professional athletes did not become professional athletes by accident. It was very purposeful in their life that they got to that place. Two, I wanted a role model that emulated success. The guy rolling through the neighborhood in a Lexus with a trunk full of cocaine, that story is the same way. Every time, every city, in every place. There's no deviation from the ending of that. But these professional athletes, when their athletic careers end, often they go back to being engineers and entrepreneurs and business people and things that they studied for in their collegiate career, all right? So there's life after athletics. And I wanted my kids to understand that. And then the final thing was, I wanted my kids to understand that there was a direct connection between nutrition and performance, whether it was academic performance or physical performance, that we are machines and we require fuel to do the things that we do. So we created this thing called Breakfast in Birdland, right? So the school that had the best breakfast participation got to have breakfast with the Ravens and the Orioles and their mascots and their trainers and their nutritionists, and it was amazing, right? And then we took it a step further and we said, what about breakfast in the classroom? And that's why I created these little breakfast boxes, right? So the little breakfast boxes inside has the lowest sugar cereal on the market, 100% juice, and a whole grain snack that didn't have dyes or preservatives in it, and we served it with a carton of milk, and they were shelf stable, so we could move them around the district. They worked great for grab and go for high school kids, because high school kids, I don't know if you know, it's a social faux pas to hang out in the cafeteria, right? So don't try it. It doesn't work. Don't waste your money. Figure out ways to get the food to them. And then Baltimore's a union town, right? And I had my janitorial staff and my lunch lady say, it's not in our contract. And I said, okay. So I went to the kids and I took the oldest group of kids in every school and I said, you're in my breakfast club. So again, I grew up in New Orleans. I went to Jesuit, right? And I secretly lusted after the hall monitor sash, right? Because it was an outward sign of respect and nobility, something I did not possess, right? And I thought, why not give our kids some responsibilities? Look, we have an expectation that they're going to be good citizens, but we don't give them citizenship skills to home, right? So our oldest group of kids took the breakfast into the classroom, picked up the trash, brought it back. We started giving them community service hours for the work that they did, right? And in our school, there was a requirement of so many service hours to graduate, so why not sort of incorporate this thing? And what we found was universally, little kids could not wait to be older kids to run the breakfast program. And oh, by the way, we went from serving 8,500 breakfasts a day to 45,000 breakfasts a day in less than 60 days. was an additional $12 million of revenue just in breakfast through the reimbursement. Now I got a little money. I got a little money to work with, right? So I'm going to start doing some other stuff. Next slide. So this gentleman sitting down here, his name is Reverend George Bragg. He was born a slave. And he founded this orphanage outside of Baltimore. Even though the Emancipation Proclamation had been proclaimed, he understood that his people would never experience freedom, would never experience real freedom until they had economic freedom. And that meant jobs, and careers, and opportunity that up until that point in history did not exist. So he founded this place, the Great Kids Farm, and if you look at the little two maps next to it, see that little patch of green right there? That is in the heart of Babylon, right? It is surrounded by strip malls and muffler shops and pizza places, but it's this little piece of green in the middle of Baltimore that was lost. That was an abandoned property. One of the deals that I made coming to Baltimore was, because of my involvement in Farms to School and the fact that, look, if you give a kid a seed and let them plant that seed in the ground and they watch that grow and it produces something that they can harvest, that they can share with their friends, it forever changes the way they look at food. It's no longer consumption, right? It's a lesson far greater than that. Look, the most powerful thing I've ever seen in my life was watching a kid walk down a row of cherry tomatoes that she planted, and she plucked one off the vine, still warm from the summer sun, and she popped it in her mouth, and the flavor exploded, and this glow came over her face. Look, that is something every child in this country should experience, and that is something that we have the ability to allow them to experience, right? So, anyhow, this little piece of property was my little, my starting point. I needed to have a place where I could start reintroducing real food to our kids. Look, we've successfully raised an entire generation of children that think fruit is a flavor. It is a fruity flavor. It's not food, all right? It's something else, all right? So how do you do that? You've got to reintroduce that. Next slide. So I'm a food educator, and look, I was a bad student, right? I probably had learning disabilities, My daughter will tell you that I have oppositional defiance disorder, but, I'm undiagnosed now. Look, I didn't get math until I started taking apart recipes. Cooking was the thing that connected with me. I like to cook, right? So when I started taking apart recipes and expanding them, I understood sort of complex math, right? I didn't get chemistry until I saw bread rise. I mean, that was the thing that spoke to me. That was the voice that spoke to me. So I'm convinced that our hallways are full of these young Julia Childs and James Beards waiting to hear a voice. And part of education is facilitating a voice, making sure that our kids connect to something. They all learn differently. So you learn with your eyes and your ears, but you also learn with your mouth. You taste, right? That kid right there, tasting a radish green for the very first time in his life. His expression tells the story. Just as important to feed our kids really good food, they need to have jobs. They need to have careers when they leave our schools. So I made up this word, agro-hospitality, right? Nice made-up word, like making up words. And it simply means the farm to fork. In all of the industries that are associated between putting the seed in the ground or even planning to put the seed in the ground to putting the fork in your mouth, right? So there's math and there's science and there's technology and logistics and chemistry and agriculture and hospitality and business and management. There's all of these great jobs that are associated with it. Look, as a chef, I have had the great privilege to cook from Hartford to Hong Kong in my career, and I've been able to see the world, literally. I'm a kid who came from the Desire Street projects in New Orleans to see the world because of my trade, And I think that this is a great career path. It is probably the last career path that you can go from the stockroom to the boardroom in, you know, without additional education, higher education. It always helps, right? But it's also the last probably career path that, you know, a single mom trying to raise her kids can ensure that they're going to get a paycheck every week. So it's a wonderful, wonderful career path. Next slide. So we ground our kids in education, right? And we sort of make everything that we do a teaching moment. The breakfast in the classroom, teaching moment, right? You know, the breakfast in the classroom was like, I put this little secret code inside of each one of the little boxes. 1 in 20 of the boxes had the secret code, and they won like whatever swag, you know, an MP3 player, DVD, music downloads, Orioles hats, Ravens jerseys, whatever swag I could hustle. And I knew that it was kind of Pavlovian, that they were tearing open the boxes looking for the prize, right? But eventually they started eating the content of the boxes that sort of changed behavior, that sort of rolled it forward. So we started doing that with, you know, our school gardens and our Great Kids Farm. So I was doing this cooking demo, and I asked these kids, I said, so look, go out to the garden and bring me some tomatoes and some basil and some carrots. And they came back with some tomatoes and basil. I said, where are the carrots? And I said, Chef G, there's no carrots out there. I said, no, there's carrots out there. And they go, Chef G, we are not stupid. We know there are no carrots out there. Carrots are orange. There's nothing but green out there. So, and I thought, aha, like that was the moment. That was the epiphany for me to stop assuming. To stop assuming that kids know where food comes from. And I went out, and those kids are sniffing some carrots. We pulled them up out of the ground, and I said, carrots. Right? But look, it was a big moment for both of us. And we all sort of went, So now, as I sort of approach like food education and education around this, like I stopped assuming, and I started, you know, trying to get right back to the basics on this thing. So it's very cool, and it's all a teachable moment, you know. Go ahead. So these are microgreens, trays of microgreens. So I grow microgreens because I can get like 3 or 4 harvests a month. Microgreens are nutritionally at their densest at that moment of being like a little microgreen, and they taste really intense. The rock star chefs in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore want them, right? So I do custom blends for those guys, it's just, you know, that was our first revenue stream. Those 3 kids there, blue shirt, striped shirt, orange shirt, those are the kids that kind of started the revolution in Baltimore. You heard a little bit on the clip, like they called me up and they said, Chef G, our food sucked. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, what can we do about it? And I said, well, look, you need to advocate for yourself. You need to start talking about this thing. So they actually created a cafeteria Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights simply said, we have the right to real food. We have the right to have it prepared. We have a responsibility to eat the food that's being served to us, because there are many that don't have access to food, right? And they took the school lunch down to the school board one night and flipped the tray over and nothing fell off. And they said, try some. Nobody on the school board was willing to eat lunch that day. But it began a conversation. It began this conversation around, we need to change, we need to fix, we need to do something about that. And those 3 kids, I had an opportunity when the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act was being debated in Congress. It was the first time in American history that American children got to testify before Congress about a law that directly affected them. It was a powerful moment, and it was like personally and professionally living through a Schoolhouse Rock episode, you know, seeing this happen, and their faces when they realized how much power they have. But these kids that we're talking about right now, 20 years from now are going to be deciding how you live, how you choose to die, who you choose to marry, what your world is going to be about, and if you are not willing to step up to the plate today and do the right thing, what is your expectation? This is real stuff, you guys. Next slide. So a brand new approach, right? So my approach is fresher is better, right? You know, I learned that as a restaurateur. I learned that if I provided my clients with the best possible food, that they would keep coming back to my restaurant, you know, the cash registers kept ringing, and people had jobs, and life was good. So I applied that in child nutrition, and how I did that first was with Peaches in Baltimore, right? I lived on my sailboat when I was in Baltimore. We have a 36.5-foot ketch that I lived in the harbor, right? And I got off the boat, and I went online. I found sort of this website called Maryland's Best, and it listed all of the farms in Maryland. And I drove out to this farm, the Boggers Farm, and I met this guy Les Dietz, right? And told him, you know, I'm the new food service director, and you know, I'd like to see what you guys have, and maybe we can incorporate some of this good fresh stuff into our menu. And very skeptical, you know, and so we spent that whole day driving around his pickup truck over this 850-acre farm, and we went from field to field and orchard to orchard, and he told me what happened in that field, in that orchard, 25 years before, 50 years before, 100 years before, 150 years before, and I realized this was not just a piece of dirt, all right, that this was his family's legacy, that his family had invested their lives, their careers, their fortune, and their bounty in this little small piece of dirt, all right? So doing business with me needed to be personal, right? And that's kind of how I do business. So we went back to the packing shed, and they were running Peaches at the time, right? And I said, Les, I want you to pick every piece of fruit off the tree. I don't need stickers. I don't need special boxes. I don't need special handling. You know, he's a farmer who was practicing sort of, you know, GAP rules, which is, you know, what is it, like good agriculture practices, right? Yet not GAP certified, right? You know, nice clean operation. I said, look, I want you to put those peaches in a wooden crate and take the wooden crates and ship to my warehouse. And from my warehouse, I'll send them to my schools, and I'll wash the peaches, and I'll feed them to my kids, and then I'll take the empty wooden crates, and we send back to the warehouse. When you drop off the next load, you back haul the empties, and you bring me good stuff. And we keep doing this until I run out of money or you run out of fruit. And we went from peaches to nectarines, to apples, to pears, and we ran that through, like, you know, up through almost March, you know, with the abundance that was there. He also realized that he couldn't totally supply me. Look, when I serve peaches for lunch, for one serving for one day, it's 40,000 pounds of peaches. A lot of peaches, all right? But his neighbor grew peaches, and this other farm grew peaches, and pretty soon they're all sort of pooling their resources together. And look, we worked out a deal where I could buy peaches from them for 8 cents a piece, or I could buy USDA canned peaches packed in corn syrup that traveled 2,200 miles to get to my warehouse for 14 cents a portion. What made more sense? You know? And the thing for me that really clinched it was this notion that, well, no, my very first day on the job as the food service director, I'm at this little school called Lockerman Bundy School, right? It's a poor little school on the west side. And I'm sitting there with these 3 semi-toothed second graders, right? One, you know, I forget how tiny second graders are. And one kid is just rubbing a peach along his face. And I said, it's supposed to feel like that. Another kid is like breathing into this peach. And it's supposed to smell like that. And the third kid is biting into this peach, and the juice is running down his face, and his big smile is coming over his face, and it's supposed to taste like that. And it was the first time in their lives that they had had the experience of tasting a peach. Like, again, we assume this stuff happens everywhere. In many of our cities, children live in food deserts, where food is not accessible. Real food is not accessible. So that was my approach. And look, we helped create legislation that required Baltimore City Public Schools to only buy from Maryland farms. In our very first year, we spent $2.3 million on local produce. I could have spent $6 million, but that $2.3 million, flipping 10 times, that's a $23 million a year impact in the community. So start looking beyond the box. Start looking beyond that moment. Next slide. So this Great Kids Farm, right? So I knew that, one, I didn't get any money, right? My boss is very generous. He said, you can have the land, but we don't have money. I said, okay. It's a great story, right? But I knew that, look, I can build this, and I can build it because there's a community out there, right? So I always sort of think in cooking metaphors, because that's, you know, again, not so smart, so that's how I have to sort of process stuff. So look, I liken a community to gumbo. Anybody here know what gumbo is? So gumbo is this amazing elixir, right? This great seasonal stew that is made up of all of these unlikely ingredients. And if you have duck, you have duck gumbo. If you have alligator, you have alligator gumbo. If you have chicken, it's chicken gumbo. But whatever you have goes in the pot and it becomes gumbo, right? And sometimes it's like that guy, right? He came into the village and the village was starving and he had the big pot of water and he filled it with water and he dropped a rock in it, right? And he's standing there stirring this pot of water with a rock and they go, what are you doing? I'm making stone soup. It's really good. You know, it's a rock with some water. And they said, well, you know, it would be better if we had other stuff. And, you know, well, you know, I have an onion. He threw an onion in. Somebody else had a potato. And then there were some carrots and some turnips and a chicken. And pretty soon this pot is full of all this stuff that created this nutritionally dense stew that fed this village that they were no longer starving to death, right? Communities are like that. Every community is the same. We have, you know, nurses and doctors and plumbers and carpenters and electricians and mechanics, and every community has resources. And it's about tying into those resources. But for you guys, because you guys are leaders, you're pot stirrers. You guys need to start stirring the pot and start talking about what you need to get thrown into that pot, right? To facilitate the projects that you're doing. So, so it takes the community to build a farm. So, you know, we all sort of join together with our collective skills to do things. The electricians rewired, plumbers replumbed, carpenters built, you know, gardeners gardened. Next slide. And the kids came. And our Great Kids Farm, there's a reason why it's called Great Kids Farm, because it's about our kids, right? Even though they don't look like farmers, they are amazing urban farmers. They were there in the middle of the very first snowstorm of the season to build a containment area for the goats that I was about to bring in, right? So, you know, I believe in alternative methods of land management and stuff, and I thought, you know, goats are perfect because goats will clear, aerate, fertilize, all without a coffee break or a union grievance, right? You know? So, so this farmer donated like this small herd of goats. We had 8 goats that we started with, and you know, we started our farm. Next slide. And of course, our goats. You know, bringing goats to the Great Kids Farm was like bringing a herd of unicorn there, right? So people had never seen goats in New York City, right? And on our first weekend, we had over 200 cars drive through the farm. We're here to see the goats. You know, it's like, okay. You know? We were really careful to put the goats away at night too, so they didn't become goat curry the next day. So, you know. So anyhow, next slide. So this is how a farm evolves. You sort of begin at the beginning, and you know, you work through the process, and you plan, and it takes form and it takes shape in a way that you know, you don't really expect it to. And the goats keep chewing our chickens, our bees, you know, and you know, we were able to sort of create this, you know, self-sustaining business model over the course of a year. All right, you can go back. Yeah, next.
want to stop on that earth oven. It was all of this cool stuff, and it was all these great people that got involved to sort of get this thing off the ground. All right, there we go. So, teaching environments, you know, it's about a lot of things. It's, you know, art and language and math and science and all this stuff. And so this is a, you know, my kids like pizza, right? And I said, I like pizza too. And this group of hippie kids came to me and said, Chef G, we could build earth ovens. And I thought, okay. And so they came and they laid out this big blue tarp and they went down to the river and they started grabbing mud and some straw and they all set up their little drum circle and they started drumming and the kids started dancing in the mud and the straw and then they started kind of free-forming this thing. So these earth ovens exist all over the planet. Like virtually every planet or every culture on the planet has bread in their cuisine, with maybe the exception of Inuits. You know, I think blubber is the end-all, the be-all there, right? But and they're supposed to be done with these like dense sort of stone bases, like granite or something like that. Well, we don't have granite. We have a lot of busted-up concrete. So I told my kids, we're going to build ours out of a very special stone that only grows in Baltimore. It's called urbanite, right? So it's all busted-up stone. But look, these kids like free-formed and built this great earth oven, and we planted a grow-your-own pizza garden next to this oven, and the kids like literally would go pick eggplants and peppers and basil and tomatoes and create their own pizzas outside by themselves, start to finish. It was this vertically integrated experience of like planting it, harvesting it, growing it, serving it, cooking it, eating it. Pretty cool stuff. Changes the way you think. Next slide. So paying the bills. So how do you do all this stuff, right? So I'm a businessman. I know that I've got to pay the bills to get there, right? So this is one of 3 greenhouses that were on the property. No glass, so you know we got local glass guys to do it. It's funny, when we first got the property, we had to clear it. There was just a lot of trash and junk there, and we needed wheelbarrows. We didn't have wheelbarrows. This kid, he came up to me and said, Chef G, don't worry about the wheelbarrows. And I said, okay. And then the next day I showed up and the parking lot was full of Home Depot shopping carts. And we used these shopping carts for about a month and a half until I was quite convinced I was going to jail, right? And I went down to the local Home Depot and I said, I got your shopping carts? And told him the story, and when he stopped laughing, he wrote a check for $1,000 and gave me a half a dozen wheelbarrows and said, we want to help. We want to help. And through a series of meetings and conversations, I was introduced to Arthur M. Blank, who's the founder of Home Depot, owns the Atlanta Falcons, lives in Atlanta, and I do a great deal of work with him. And his philosophy is this: I will help. I will supply materials, you supply the manpower, the people power, and together, you know, anything is possible. So it's again through those sort of unlikely connections that things evolve and things change, and you know, it was pretty amazing. Next slide. So we do worms. You know, we have a composting operation there. You know, we create our own soil. We sell the worms. Look, you can do this for as little as $40 with a Walmart plastic tub and some bait, right? And start saving your dinner scraps. Or you can create a fully commercial vermiculture operation for as little as $1,500. But it's a great revenue generator for us. But it also teaches our kids, about the cycle of life and how all of that stuff works. Very, very, very cool stuff. And Will Allen, who's the founder of Growing Power, came out. We have this ongoing agreement that he helped me and I help him. So for my housewarming present, Great Kids Farm, he gave me 300 pounds of worms. So it's pretty cool. Next slide. Mushrooms. So the same hippie kids came to me and said, Chef, you can grow mushrooms. I said, I'm sure we could. No, Chef G, the kind everybody can have. So, okay. So he taught me
that by taking these fallen branches that were scattered all over the farm and drilling some holes in them and inoculating them with mushroom spores, that you could create an amazing cash crop of mushrooms. And look, we generate, 100 or so pounds of mushrooms a week, and we don't do anything. We just go out and harvest them. And they're all purchased by these fancy pants local restaurants that use them on their menu, that talk about, we only use locally grown mushrooms for the children, right? So it works for them, it's all good, and we as a community, have started figuring out other business opportunities. Next slide. So salad greens. So our kids, they raise a lot of their own salad greens in their gardens. Look, the Great Kids Farm is kind of the mothership, right? And we host field trips there every single day. And when a group of kids come out, they come out with a plan that they're going to plant a school garden, right? And they know what kind of stuff they want to plant. They've already planned this out. This is a classroom project, right? And some of it is food, and some of it is aesthetic. It's beauty, plant, flowers, things like that, ornamentals. In Baltimore, we have a territory issue. I have children on the north side of the city trying to kill children on the south side of the city because they live on the south side of the city. I have kids on the west side of the city trying to kill kids on the east side of the city because they live there. So this, for me, was a way to connect the city. So when a group of kids come out there, they plant a school garden for another school in another part of the city. And then they're connected. And they talk about how your garden is growing. And they leave there with plantings that another group of kids planted for them. So it was one of my little Forrest Gump experiments that I thought would work, and it's been very, very successful. And we've developed relationships, like inter-gang relationships that work well. I got this grant, right, to work with kids aging out of foster care, right? And the grant was for 50 kids. And people said, you're nuts. Why are you spending money on those kids? Because those kids really aren't interested. Those kids will disappoint you. Those kids, are kind of throwaways. Just let the cycle of life happen, right? And, and believe it. So on the day of the final interview, and the thing was to bring the kids out to the farm and teach them a business model, teach them how to sort of do their own businesses where they're growing stuff that I could purchase that goes back into the school system, and then the sort of circle is completed, right? So when I got there at the Lake Clifton High School, it's one of the toughest, hardest schools in Baltimore. The hallways were packed with over 250 kids with borrowed shirts and ties, waiting to impress me so they could get an opportunity for 50 slots. Because these kids didn't want to spend another summer thinking about how am I going to survive the next night. Am I going to get shot? Is my mother going to get shot? My neighbor? Will I be brutalized? Will I have to go out and sling drugs because there's no other money out there and I've got to survive? Like, these kids have to live in an underground economy because we don't allow them to operate in the other economy that exists. It's survival. So long story short, these 50 kids, I was forced to choose 50 kids that I thought I could save, right? And look, we have passed on an enormous debt load to these children, and we're not even willing to feed them today. Think about this stuff. It's serious. So anyhow, next slide. So these are the hoop houses that we built. So we built these at Lake Clifton High School. 3 of these are 24 by 130 feet long each. And they're filled with nutrient-dense greens. And like I said at the top of the conversation, that we created legislation that I could only buy from Maryland farmers. Oh, guess what? They're Maryland farmers now. I am required by law to buy from them, all right? They happen to be students. You know, and now there's a great urban agriculture project going on in Baltimore called Big City Farms that is a going business. Their biggest client is a little grocery store chain called Whole Foods, right? And so they do very well. And so we contract crop, we purchase everything that they grow, you know? And some of these kids straight out of high school are making 40, 50 grand a year running these operations. Give them the power. Give them permission. You know, Baltimore has like a lot of empty, you know, blown away land, and the city has been really good about allowing us to sort of build on that land. And we have heavy metal issues in Baltimore, so we lay like polymer shields down on the bottom and fill it up with organic soil, build a hoop house over it, and then we start with organic kind of plugs from day one. So it's all good, healthy food from day one. So, next slide. So our kids, you know, all their school gardens are different. These are old pallets that were being thrown away. Now they're raised bed gardens. You know, flowers. Next slide. They eat as much as they harvest. You know, and really kind of amazing kids. That big white drum back there, plastic drum. There's a Pepsi bottling plant in Baltimore, so they give us all of their old syrup drums, and we use them for rain catchment because we don't have, irrigation. So we tie it up to the rooftops for catchment areas so we catch rain, and that sort of feeds our gardens and stuff. So next slide. Bees, we do bees in Baltimore, and yeah, there were a group of parents going, "He'll kill the children!" Right? These are not crazy, swarming South American, doing the samba and biting you bees. These are honeybees, right? And yes, we have EpiPens and all that stuff. No, nobody's died. You know, there was only one kid stung, and that's because he was kicked in the hive. But I'm glad to say he's still alive and well, doing okay. But yeah, the bees were like this great teaching tool, of this cooperative, collaborative, that everybody is part of it to make it work, So next slide. So we are busy bees in Baltimore doing stuff. Next slide. So I wanted to re-green all of the schools in Baltimore, but I didn't want to use ornamental trees. I wanted to use fruit trees. So I got on the phone and I called the American Fruit Growers Association, right? And I told them about, what I wanted to do. And they said, "Oh, that's an interesting plan. Can you have somebody out at the farm on such and such a date?" And I said, "Yeah," because they wanted to talk to us. I said, "Yeah, great, that'd be awesome." Well, what showed up was a tractor trailer with over 800 different types of fruit trees that would grow in our region. And they said, "Let's plant some trees." So we had a lottery, and our kids, you'll notice there are no adults. It's all children that are planting fruit trees, and this is in the hood. These are in our neighborhoods. Next slide. That they're, sort of regreening their schools. And it was very purposeful. They understood what it was about. They understood their stewardship. My grandfather was a really wise guy. He told me that, often the farmer that plants the orchard is not the farmer who gets to rest under the canopy of the trees, right? These kids understood their role as orchard builders. They understood that they were building an orchard not for them, but for their little brothers and sisters, or maybe their kids. So it was really powerful stuff to watch them do this thing. All right. So look, there are 5 kind of proven strategies to get off the dime and get stuff going, and they're really simple. So the first one is just have a goal, have a plan, right? So if you're going to do a school garden, it doesn't have to be a 33-acre garden. It can be coffee cans on a windowsill with some fresh herbs. It can be that simple, that easy. But number 2 is the most important thing. Start, start, start. You've got to begin with something. You've got to move your foot in front of you and start moving. Figure out what it is that you're interested in, and I guarantee you're going to find 20 people that have a shared interest, that are maybe further along the process or not as far as you are along the process. And again, it's gumbo, y'all. You need to just throw everything into the pot and start cooking and start stirring. And then partner, communicate. Just be resourceful. Those kids that had urban wheelbarrows, That's what they had. That's what they understood. That's what they knew they could get their hands on to get the job done. So it's about like moving that stuff together. And then just remember that everyone is inexperienced, right? And you just sort of begin with the knowledge set that you have. And, you know, my kids like to think I'm sort of the Forrest Gump of food service, you know, that I just kind of, you know, Forrest Gump my way through things, and it happens. And it does, because I liken myself more to like Blanche Dubois. I rely on the kindness of strangers, you know. But it's everyone in this room that makes a difference. It's everyone in this room that has different resources and access to different things that can move a project forward. And then, you know, remember, just allow your plan to change and evolve. Like what you begin with, like my vision of the Great Kids Farm and the reality of what it is today, like the reality far exceeds my expectation. And it was because a wealth of knowledge and resources were sort of brought forth from the community to make it a great place. It is a national model. It is a place that everybody should go. Next slide. And then sort of you just kind of start, and you need to be kind of an ingredient of change. Next. And then, so look, I'm going to end this with a quick story, right? So I grew up in the 60s, right? You know, and I remember this young president who was from around here someplace. This young president said, "In this decade, we will put a man on the moon. In this decade, our rockets blew up on the launch pad. We didn't have guidance devices. We didn't have the technology nor the infrastructure to facilitate his vision of, in this decade, we will put a man on the moon." Well, in that decade, a lot of crazy stuff happened. A lot of our leaders were murdered for what they believed, for what they dared speak out loud. We fought wars that maybe we should not have been involved in. A lot of social injustice was righted, or at least the conversation began to right some of the social injustice. But in the summer of 1969, in a hot July afternoon in New Orleans, in the living room of my grandfather, a man who didn't speak English, and a man who saw air travel happen in his lifetime, we watched men walk on the moon. Because we as a nation willed that to happen. We as a nation decided that nothing was more important than this for us. This was one of our goals, and we made it happen. You know, the stuff that I'm talking about is not rocket science. The stuff that I'm talking about should not take a decade to achieve. The stuff that I'm talking about is obtainable. We have the technology, we have the will, we have the where. 1 in 3 children born after the year 2000 are going to get type 2 diabetes in their lifetime. 1 in 2 African American or children of color are going to get this disease in their lifetime. It's fact, right? This is not speculation. I also grew up in a generation that polio just about decimated this planet. And we as a planet decided enough, and we would combine our resources together to eradicate this disease that was stripping away an entire generation. And we did, because we chose to make that happen. Look, I have a very personal stake in why I do this. On my very first day on the job at the Conval School District, this little district in New Hampshire, the school nurse called me into her office to meet this little boy. He's an 11-year-old boy, right? And he was in the school nurse's office because his fingers were too sore to grip a pencil. They were checking his blood every day. And this little kid was a great kid, nice kid, smart kid, did everything his parents asked him to do. On the way to school, you know, he had half a dozen donuts, and, you know, they had, you know, pizza night, and, you know, fried chicken night when he got good test scores. They went to McBurger World, and, you know, celebrated all that stuff. And look, and his parents are nice people too, but they're busy, and they both work to make the ends meet. And this is what they knew. This is, you know, beat them if you love them. One of those deals, right? So this little kid is
His stomach is black and blue from multiple injection sites, and his legs are black and blue from multiple injection sites. And he's crying because he didn't understand what was going on with his body and how this disease was affecting. I was crying because I knew and I understood. At the top of my talk, I talked about having a life-changing moment, and I ran to my comfort zone and I ate everything in sight. I gained about 100 pounds and I became a type 2 insulin-dependent diabetic. And every day I was stuffing a needle in my stomach 4 or 5 times a day, every day. And that became the tipping point for me, that I realized that if I'm going to do this job, I'm going to walk the walk and talk the talk. November the 13th, in a couple of weeks away, will mark 5 years for me that I'm insulin-free, I am drug-free, because it is reversible. The beautiful thing about this disease is it is reversible. We don't have a cure, but we can stop it. And it's about what we eat, how we eat, how we get there. So look, as you move forward, you guys, and as you start taking on projects, and when people come to you and say, the bureaucracy won't allow this to happen, it's too hard, it's a kill the bureaucracy. Thank you.
Understand your food system, do something about it, and care about those people that you work with that are part of the food system as well as yourself. So thanks, Tony.
The work we do at Allies and Partners is not easy. We endeavor to create programs and initiatives that bring about systemic change to our communities. Our work is frustrating, difficult, and labor-intensive. If today has proven anything, it has shown us that like-minded community individuals can bring about change. It has shown us that both Greater Fall River and Greater New Bedford are communities that work in collaboration to make the world a better place. To paraphrase one of my heroes, Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. You are that group. You are the thoughtful. You are the committed individuals. And together, we can bring about change. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you next year.